The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet, with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube, and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. No retribution, and thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show, and I encourage you to go to the paltalknewsnetwork.com site to see stories that you may or may not see, hear, or read in the mainstream media. A couple of interesting stories on the site this afternoon about the loan modification program that the administration announced. I already told you earlier that I have learned that less than 3% of the loan mods are accepted. How that works is if you're in trouble trying to make your mortgage payment, maybe because your house is not worth what it was worth when you purchased it, and maybe your financial situation has depreciated appreciably, you can go to, and they're threatening to foreclose, you can go to a nonprofit organization and you open your books and your hearts to them, and you show them what your financial situation is, and you say, I'd like to get a modification of my loan, and I would like my bank to accept an offer X amount of pennies on the dollar, sort of like when somebody goes into bankruptcy. Then they pay their creditors X amount of pennies on the dollar. And then they go and they work out what they believe is a reasonable amount of money to offer to the bank. Well, less than 3% of those are accepted. There's a great story there by ProPublica, the investigative reporting organization, that talks about how Chase Bank is denying loan mods because they believe that the individual requesting it has not suffered a significant enough decrease in income. So what happens when they don't work with you is that you end up getting evicted from your home, and then the house that you have been maintaining for all these years sits there vacant. And the bank then is responsible for paying for the upkeep of that house. And because the house is vacant and they're not keeping it up as well as you would had you been there, it starts to depreciate even more in value. And in an environment like the one that we see here in the Detroit area and in many other parts of this nation, the housing market it has suffered so much. Now they're putting that house on the market and they can't sell it. I don't understand why they don't work with people when they get into financial trouble. Imagine you work for General Motors or Chrysler and you're making over $100,000 a year, and you have a house that you purchased that was worth $300,000 and it appreciated to $500,000. Well, that's pretty good because you're paying a loan on a $300,000 house. It's now worth $500,000. But now the house no longer is worth $500,000. Let's say the house is worth $100,000 and you've been laid off and you can't make your house payments. You could try to sell the house at a loss to get a little bit of money, maybe, at least to get from under the mortgage and downsize into a more modest home, which you would think would be affordable because the housing market has plummeted so, but nobody will buy the house from you. So now you go to your friendly mortgage company who was bailed out by you and me, the taxpayers, and you say, look, I can't afford to pay for this house. Obviously, if I can't sell it because the market is so depressed, at least not at the value that you place on the house, you can't sell it. So why don't we come to terms, rather than me go and renting another house and spending my money there, I'll give that amount of money to you, and at least you get a flow of income on a house that you otherwise can't sell anyway, and I get to keep my house. Only 3%, less than 3% of the times that people come forward with these loan mods, they say yes. Another interesting story, by the way, on the Pal Talk News Network site, a Pew poll shows that in the Muslim world, Boaz, what amount of support in the Muslim world would you believe, forget percentages, would you believe that there would be a large amount, an average amount, or a minuscule amount of support for Hamas and Hezbollah?
I would and this is basically based on what I know, they have next to no support whatsoever.
That's right, Boaz. Next to no support, whatever. You know who they are? They are the bullies on the block, Hamas and Hezbollah. These terrorist organizations are bullies on the block, and the people who are most adversely affected by them are the people who live in the neighborhood, fellow Muslims. And they've had it. And by the way, what you see in Iran is just a microcosm of the feelings around the Muslim world. People want freedoms. They want equality for women. They want education for both boys and for girls. They want equal opportunity. They basically want to model themselves behind the values that those of us in the West so embrace. And so for those of you who think that all Muslims are terrorists, you ought to take another look, because most Muslims seek the same freedoms that you and I do. Yesterday, when we had that delightful, though depressing roundtable here on News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News Network, talking about Detroit as a microcosm of, and sadly representative, perhaps more magnified than elsewhere, of the economic decline of this country over the past 2 years or so. One of the issues that we really focused on was education. 75% of the children in the Detroit school district, and I believe that there are similar figures in other large urban school districts, 75% drop out. 75%. Today, my lovely daughter Julie and I had opportunity to visit 2 small schools in Detroit. The first one, run